Um, and I have the exact document right there. And all the words for you because I think it's important that if we're going to talk about something, we might as well know what it says. So it says, to authorize the Secretary of the Interior to issue certificates of citizenship to Indians, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that all non-citizen Indians born within the territorial limits of the United States, and they are hereby declared to be citizens of the United States, provided that the granting of such citizenship shall not in any manner impair or otherwise affect the right of any Indian to tribal or other property. The importance of the non-citizen Indian line in that is because many tribes had already had treaties with the United States and were already citizens of the United States. But this was not true of all of the tribes within the U.S. territories. And this law was made to make every Indian an American citizen. This was not a choice that any of them had besides the ones who had previously made treaties with the United States. It was just put upon them that, okay, now you're citizens and you have all the responsibilities and everything else that goes along with being a citizen of the United States. So our next question, or our first question for you is, what does citizenship mean to you? So we want you to pick a partner next to you, chat about it for a minute or two about what it means to you.
Okay, we will wrap it up, but we're going to ask for 5 ideas from people, brief ideas about what you said it means, what citizenship means to you. So,
to belong.
The rights and privileges under the Constitution.
Said there was kind of a reciprocal relationship between the state or the nation and you as an individual.
okay.
Both giving and receiving.
Yeah. So relationship between the larger body and the people. Wendy?
I think to me it gives you standing to criticize the government.
Do we have one more idea? Someone? Nick?
You're held accountable to the laws of the country, not only the rights and privileges.
Okay. Do most of these seem positive or negative?
How
Do you
about
want to belong?
Could you do it this way? Like,
do you like belonging?
down.
Is that good or bad? Good. Do we like having rights and privileges? Good or bad? Good. Do we like having a relationship with the state, with the government? Good or bad? Good. Okay. Do we like having a standing, a footing to be able to criticize? To have a say, to be able to vote and stuff. Okay? That would be a couple of laws. We like having laws.
All right, thanks for your help. These are all good ideas and true ideas. And when I got this topic and I first started doing research, I thought, oh, that's purely a good thing, right? Native Americans become citizens. And then as I did more research, I realized that Natives were already considered citizens of their own tribal nations. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing that they became citizens of the U.S. As we'll talk about, lots of privileges and rights come along with that. But in some ways, it's sort of like, it's just confusing, you know, like who am I, where do I belong, and almost takes value away from the sense of belonging with their own tribes. So it's kind of more complicated than good or bad. And I kind of continued on that path and asked, well, what does it mean to be a Native citizen? And initially, Natives were given citizenship from white people in their own nations based on, I saw this video, based on things like measuring head size to determine how purely Native they were. And in this day, tribes determine who has membership in their tribe or not, and some of those membership ideas are still based on those original determinations of if someone is Native or not. So depending on the tribe, a lot of tribes base membership on percentage of blood that is Native. So some people say 1/4, 1/8, 1/2. Some tribes just trace your lineage. So even though tribes have the right to govern who is part of their tribe or not, what they base it on still is coming from outside. So we kind of went down the road of what do Native governments look like, because we know a lot about what it means to be an American citizen, but maybe not that much about what it means to be a Native citizen. So first of all, what does sovereignty mean? That is just the right of tribes to govern themselves, given to them by the U.S. government. And some of those rights include defining membership, and that's what I just touched on. So they determine who belongs to their tribe, usually based on blood percentage. They have the right to manage tribal property. That might look like if a tribe wants to sell resources on their reservation, like wood, they have the right to collectively make decisions about that. They also regulate business and domestic relations. And then this participation in consent that I have in quotes is basically saying the U.S. government still has a lot of power to make decisions about Natives for them, but they need to have their participation and consent when making such decisions. And so I was interested in what Indian governments look like, and today Indian governments are mostly look democratic, so they have elected leaders making decisions, but that is relatively new, and again kind of comes from the structure of U.S. government. And previously, Natives were governed by tribal laws, cultural traditions, religious customs, and kinship systems. And as I was doing my research, I found this really interesting video. The link is here. It's about an hour and a half long, and I just want to show you like 4 minutes of it. But if you have the time, I would recommend looking it up. I learned a lot from it. The speaker is a professor at Bemidji State University. He teaches the Ojibwe language. His name is Anton Troyer. I'm not sure if that's how you say his name. And this is from a book tour. He wrote a book that was published by the Minnesota Historical Society called Everything You Wanted to Know About Indians But Were Afraid to Ask. And the clip that we're going to see is talking about passing down a tradition to his son, and more so Native Americans governed in that kind of way. Their sense of belonging came from passing down traditions in this way. So
the story when we're opening up the sugar bush in do a lot of the work. And that's not just because I have a large family and they make good slave labor. But one of the things we'll do, just for example, is let's say somebody kills their first deer. Now, in former times, it used to be the custom that they'd cook the entire deer and send tobacco throughout the village, and people would come and they'd actually eat the whole deer in one sitting. It's a little bit harder to do that now because people are a little more spread out and life's fast and busy. So what we do in my family, we will cook up some significant portion of it. We will invite family members, namesakes. I can talk about naming traditions too, because that's another important one. People over. And then at the feast, we just did one of these for one of my sons, Beijing. And so instead of just like eating, it's a teaching opportunity. So they'll take the first bite of food and they'll offer it to the young hunter, but he has to refuse the first bite. And he has to say, "No, I'm thinking about children who have no one to provide for them." Say, okay. So they put the food back and take a new spoon and say, "Beijing." He has to refuse the second bite and say, "No, I'm thinking about my elders who can't get out into the woods to hunt for themselves." Okay. Put it back. Take another bite. Beijing. He has to refuse the third time. "No, I'm thinking about my family, my community, the people who came here today to support me." Okay. Put it back. Take another spoon. Beijing. And then he can eat. And then they'll tell the young hunter, they'll say, "Look, our tradition and custom around hunting is different from many other people. You're not hunting to put horns on the wall. You're not going to kill an animal just to feed to the dogs. When you take the life of an animal, that's a really serious thing. And you do it for certain reasons. These reasons that you just said. And to remind you of this, you have to remember that up until today, you relied on everyone else in this room to provide all of your food, all of your nourishment, to take care of you. But today, you're feeding all of them. So this is the beginning of your transition from dependent to provider. And with this great ability comes a great responsibility. Every time you take the life of a plant, the life of an animal, or a bird, you think of these things. Children who have no one to provide for them. Elders who cannot get out and provide it for themselves. Your family, your community. And to remember this, you will give away the rest of your kill. You don't get to keep any of this for yourself. And so just a really...
Any thoughts?
Can you just hit these real quick?
Yeah.
How many more slides do you have?
I think we only have about 3.
Can you hit those?
Yes. So as Nick mentioned, accountability to laws is part of citizenship. Because all Indians are considered citizens after 1924, they are also subject to laws. Outside of reservation lands, they're subject to local, state, and federal laws, just like we would be if we were traveling or whatnot. Within reservation lands, they are only subject to federal and tribal laws. State and local laws have no authority there. Sometimes tribes will set up their own court systems to deal with tribal laws, the breaking of tribal laws. And there are some tribes that allow local authorities authorization onto their land to be able to help maintain the laws in those areas. As part of being a citizen, we are also given rights and privileges. The right to vote, to get Medicare, to have, where's my list? And welfare and access to education. There are also special rights that are reserved for Indians. Some of the rights that they didn't relinquish with their treaties to the United States, and those include hunting and fishing laws, many of which remain traditional to how they used to hunt and fish.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about education and what this information means to us as educators. So, 1924, Native Americans become citizens. We already learned about boarding schools, but that incorporates Native Americans into the right as citizens to an education, which means we as educators educate them. And something that I learned also from that video that I showed you a piece of is that attendance can be a really huge issue for Native American students as far as not actually attending class, and that there's tension between teachers and parents blaming each other for why the student isn't there. Teachers saying, you don't send your kid to school, how can I teach them? Parents, probably due to history and distrust of education, saying, well, teach my kids something they care to listen to and they'll come. And so I guess that's just something to be mindful of, and I saw a way to combat that as considering the curriculum, and I had an idea about just trying to connect to Native values. So specifically what we just saw, that video, I think points out that Natives have a huge respect for resources, natural resources. So for example, if you were teaching ecology or sustainability, I think it would be easy to connect into that set of values because you're kind of teaching that exact thing. And we have about 6 seconds, so we're going to skip that question. So 5 things to remember. In 1924, Native Americans become U.S. citizens. There was no choice in this, but along with that comes benefits and drawbacks. Qualifying natives based on their tribal customs and laws are dual citizens, both of their tribal nation and of the U.S. Tribes are generally governed democratically, and as educators, we should consider how to connect our lessons to Native values as one way to reach students.
Thank you. Now, I want you to think about the oxymoron of having sovereignty granted by someone else. So I don't know if you picked up that little nuance. Can one have sovereignty if it's granted by someone else? That's interesting thought. All right, cool. Wendy?